Guys, I've lost you now. I can't hear. Oh, hello. Now I can hear. I lost everybody. Oh. Off getting to know one another or strengthening existing connections, all while earning points on the platform. It's very much a living community that the RTM team have worked really hard to build here. So I hope you get a lot out of it. Let's move on now to our third leaders debate of the day and of the morning. Our panel will be covering the station experience. There are plans to embrace more technology such as free, fast and secure Wi-Fi in stations, which will improve the service delivered to customers. Further improvements on the horizon include a new dedicated station management team who will help with accountability for long-term station development plans. Lastly, accessibility improvements cannot be overlooked and are also in the plans. And there's been a tremendous amount of investment recently with state-of-the-art design, futuristic technology, and some improved accessibility at stations incorporated already. Nevertheless, there's always more work and improvements to be made, especially in the station where the customer experience is so key. So to explore the opportunities, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined by Jonathan Chatfield, Head of Policy, Freight and Stations at the Rail Delivery Group, Frank Ibe, Head of Line Operations, Bakerloo and Victoria Lines at Transport for London, Ian Horseman Sewell, CEO of First Class Partnerships, and Susan Holden, Customer Experience Manager, National Stations Team at Network Rail. So do feel free to use the live Q&A function, as our panelists are perfectly placed to help answer your questions, any questions that you may. So without further ado, let's get started. I mean, life to my panelists has changed very much, hasn't it, over the last 18 months? Technology is moving at an unbelievable pace. Sustainability is high on the agenda. Susan, I'm hoping you might kick us off by telling us what you're doing to restore confidence across the rail network following the pandemic and the strange 18 months, unprecedented 18 months that we've just gone through.
Yeah, our station teams have put a lot of effort into preparing for welcoming back our passengers, particularly around training and development, and really thinking about the customer and putting them at the heart of everything they do every day. So they've been undertaking disability awareness training, which is really useful because it talks about some of the anxiety and stresses that are experienced by our disabled and older passengers, particularly, which have really been affected significantly through the pandemic. That's been a rolling programme and one of our commitments under our accessible travel policy. So really important work. Also, we have introduced what we have called the safe service actions, and they're really about, greeting our passengers, with a warm and friendly smile and making them feel that they're welcome back in the stations. Really listening to our passengers, so it's listening to understand, really understanding and hearing our passengers and what they need at the time that they engage with us, and really owning it and making it happen. So when somebody asks us for help or support, we are working with them, to make sure that they will help first time and help that customer on their way safely and effectively.
Susan,
also in the stations.
I was just going to say that when you say listening to the passengers, how do you know what the passengers may need to help them feel more confident? Is that something that you do in person or through surveys? How does that work?
Yeah, so we've been using a lot of listening tools, including social media. We've done a lot of surveys, including wavelength and perception scores. We've been tracking COVID responses in line with the various pandemic issues and hearing what customers' concerns are. I mean, obviously those things are and continue to be the wearing of face coverings, provision of hand sanitizers at the station, making sure that our stations are clean for people and passengers when they're travelling through our station. So we've listened to our customer, and our customer throughout the pandemic is relying on us to make sure that our stations are as clean as possible. And really, we've got enhanced cleaning. We're using, really good products in the station to make sure that those stations are completely clean at the touch points that people use, and really having access to friendly and helpful staff, which is really, really important, that are well well educated about the concerns that our passengers may have. So we share those statistics with our station teams periodically so that they understand what's happening in and around their regions and in their personal stations.
And in my life as a passenger, I'm relying very much on you, Frank, because I spend an extraordinary amount of time on the Bakerloo and Victoria lines. So I'm just wondering, as a network, I'm very happy, by the way, on both of those lines. But, when you're considering future customer policy in terms of mask wearing, social distancing, station capacity, what are the factors that you're considering on the TfL?
Everybody,
Hi, hopefully you can hear me. So there's a number of things. So firstly, it's around in terms of face coverings. So of course, there's been a change in government guidance around face coverings, but it's a condition of carriage for London Underground, and so we really focus a lot on trying to make sure that our messages around encouraging, educating, and engaging with people to wear face coverings. We don't want to go to the last resort where it's refusing travel, but it's really about spreading the importance of the reassurance message, why it's quite important within tight spaces and like the tube that we utilise that. In terms of station capacity, we have a very vigorous monitoring process around that from our various control rooms. Each line has a control room, and we have an overarching command and control centre that looks at crowd capacities, and that's fed in to a user app, TfL Go, which people can use to help get around. We've seen a huge change in customer behaviour because our core passengers, our commuters, are no longer the majority of people who are travelling, given that hybrid working has completely changed the working landscape. We see much more leisure travel. We see more different times where peaks are, as shift work travel becomes much more focused. So we're trying to make sure that all customers have the great experience, both on board and before they even start their journey, for using technology and apps for staff, for customers, so that they know when locations will be busy and when actually is the quieter times to travel. And it's just really about building that reassurance for our teams, because we've done a huge amount of work in terms of cleaning, as been mentioned previously. Escalators, we've got UV light cleaning on escalators. We've still got single occupancy in some of our lifts, making sure that accessibility hasn't been impacted. All of those things are all why we're trying to make sure that we're welcoming and winning back our customers back to the Underground.
Ian, listening to Frank there, it's clear that TfL, they've been facing challenges and rising to those challenges. What do you think are some of the key challenges faced now by UK stations?
So I think, and I hope, that we'll look back at COVID as a moment where we really reset our targets and our expectations for passengers. I think it's fantastic that Susan and Frank are talking about so much kind of centricity on the passenger, but I think that the big challenges are to go beyond the passenger. Before COVID, we still had 40% of adults not using a train, and we know for all sorts of reasons, both the sustainability of the railway and climate resilience and all sorts of other reasons, that we need to get into that 40%. So I want us to listen to passengers, but I want us to listen to non-passengers, and I'm seeing transport authorities around the world starting to do that. The other big challenge, I think, is that we need to find ways, however we're involved in the railway, to contract for excellence, not to contract for compliance. And I think there are other sectors that we can learn from. We've got a history of contracting for compliance. We contract with operators who have to comply with things. We don't contract for excellence. We haven't found a way to stretch people And if you look at things like the automotive sector, there's stuff for us to learn there in terms of passenger experience, particularly in the station, which for many non-travelers is part of the reason they don't travel. It's too much of a challenge. And in meeting that challenge, I want us, and I've said this before, Helen, on things that we've been involved in, I want us to go beyond looking at the requirements, which we must continue to do, of those people who are wheelchair users. 1.4% of passengers need help because they're in a wheelchair, and I want us to carry on giving them more and better help, level boarding. It's all, there's great work being done there. There's a much bigger percentage of people who have issues when they're standing on a station forecourt that are to do with cognitive impairments, to do with combinations of impairments, which might be to do with dexterity, to do with, as I say, cognitive issues. And so there's a lot more we can do there, and we can use COVID as our opportunity to find ways to tackle their requirements. So my summary is really the challenges are contracting for excellence, not compliance, dealing with impairments that are not just around being in a wheelchair, listening to those people who choose, and whether it was before or after COVID, choose not to use the train. Let's hear what will change their decision. And then finally, just the whole thing, which is absolutely at the heart of managing stations, which is understanding that the railway is only one leg of the journey. And where they go from one leg to the other is called a station. And that's where people do and don't sometimes go, hang on, I'm not doing this again. It's just too difficult.
Yeah, be nice to think of the station more of a destination. I feel very aware that, Jonathan, you've sat there very patiently while everybody else has spoken. I mean, in your career, you've been a frontline station manager, as has Susan, the first since 1879, female one in Glasgow, but we'll try and get that in later, Susan. But Jonathan, first of all, just your thoughts on what you've been listening to from the other speakers, and then I'd like to ask about how you think stations can meet the needs of the new user in terms of what they should offer.
Yeah, no, thanks, Helen. I mean, I would very much echo what my colleagues really have said. I mean, I think, the last 18 months have been an unprecedented time, haven't they? And I know earlier on in the session today, people were kind of paying tribute to those that have continued to work throughout the pandemic. And I think particularly when we're thinking about stations, it's really important that we should pay tribute to those people, because the fact that so many trains have still run, and essential workers have continued to get to hospitals and to work, and all of the efforts that our station staff have put in really over the last 18 months have been tremendous. And I think absolutely, as we now hopefully begin to come out of that, it is this opportunity to reset, isn't it? And I think it is an opportunity for us to take on to the next phase where we need to go with our whole integrated transport policy. There's some big issues out there, aren't there, around sustainability, as we've got COP26 coming up, and then net zero by 2050. There's issues around accessibility that we've already talked about, and just putting the customer right at the center of that. And as you mentioned, my experience having been a station manager, so having been out there at the front line, it's an exciting place to work. It's a really important and valuable opportunity that you've got to engage with people on their journeys. And the only other kind of opening remark, I mean, we often talk about stations as gateways, don't we? They are gateways to the railway, but they also very much are gateways to their local community. So I think actually involving the community at all different levels. We've got 2,500 stations, some very small, which are involved with community rail network and other community activities, but some much larger ones that are very much the gateway to the local town, local city, and actually involving local leadership, be it devolved bodies or local mayors or transport authorities. Really important that there's that interaction between the community and the railway. These are not just railway stations, these are community facilities as well. And that interaction is going to be so important going forward.
Just briefly, Jonathan, how do we put the community more at the heart? I think that's such a good idea and such an important piece, but how do you reach out to the community to make sure that they're involved in the planning and the changes that we're going to see over the coming months and years?
Yeah, so it's a gradual building process. I think there's obviously a lot of listening that needs to be done. I think we as a railway need to be more open and transparent and accessible. I think in the time it's often been difficult for people to think, well, who do I go and speak to? How do I get involved? So I think there is a responsibility on the rail industry there to be very open and engaging. And I think that is happening. You know, there are some great examples across the country of where that relationship is working really well. And then at a very local level, you've got sort of people adopting local stations at a community level, and you've got people really getting involved because, you know, they feel a sense of ownership for their station and they really want it to be somewhere where, as we've said before, the passengers at the heart, the customers at the heart, and it's very much somewhere that people can actually come and start and finish their journey. So there's lots there for us to do around engaging with the community, but it starts with that listening and being open and transparent, I think.
Frank, when you're travelling by tube, and to be fair, when you're travelling by, traditional railways, the quality and offerings at stations varies enormously. I definitely have my favourites. Some are great, some aren't so great. Is there a plan for a bit more consistency, certainly across the tube network where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been looking at standardising at least the experience. Each station has its own uniqueness, and I think that's, whether it's to do with the history, the heritage, or the community that's been mentioned. But what we do want to make sure is that the customer experience at each station is very much the same, and that is around firstly the welcoming experience from the staff, information provided, the level of cleanliness, especially now, which is of real high importance, safety, security, lighting, all of the basics that we would almost expect. And then it's about going that step further. How do we make sure in this really connected world that, the simple things like Wi-Fi or wayfinding, and it's been mentioned around accessibility, really important that we focus a huge amount on accessibility, especially given the age of our network, the oldest metro in the world, and some of the stations are very narrow passageways, steps down to platforms. So we're really doing a huge amount of work around accessibility, lifts, ramps, and also platform level entry to trains, while looking at the trains itself. And one of my lines, the Bakerloo line, which is actually the oldest line on the network, 1972, in terms of the train stock. We're looking at trying to revamp that so that, again, both the lighting and also the experience of our customers, especially those that might need to utilize wheelchairs. We're creating wheelchair bays, which will be available in the next 2 years. But coming back to that station experience, it's really about, we're looking at that consistency across the board with the key things that our customers have said that are really important to them, and making sure that each of our stations have those, and then trying to actually still retain the character of that station in itself.
Susan, I love the fact that you were the first female station manager at Glasgow Central since it was built in 1879. And I like the fact that in your current role, obviously, you can really draw on those experiences on the front line, if you like. How are you using emerging technologies across stations? How can they support passenger experiences?
Yeah, so I think we're working heavily on this Smarter Information programme in partnership with DOT and the ORR, and really we're looking at the technologies that are in stations, such as touch screens, information for our staff on applications that they've not had before. And to be honest, they've not always had access to phones, etc. And those things are really important as we move into a different era. And actually that's something, in Network Rail, that our staff have been really on the front line without the access to the information to provide to the customer, and that does provide some challenges day to day. So really looking at that, we're introducing also the passenger app that's been developed with RDG in the industry, which is actually really about helping people access assistance in our stations. So rolling out that to all of our staff so that they can actually access all that information, who needs help, where, when and what and how, is really, really important. And I really appreciated Ian talking about, you know, we've concentrated in as an industry on people with reduced mobility, but actually, obviously, there are many other protected characteristics that we are now applying, you know, within our thinking, and we're leading on the whole industry strategy plan, where we're looking at accessibility in the whole, and what does our stations need to look like in the future, and providing that information and technologies in the future for our staff, so that they feel that they can respond really effectively to the customers and their needs, particularly as we don't really know right now who the new customer might be. And again, if we think of people with disabilities, they've got about £246 billion worth of spending power that we're not accessing as an organisation. And if we can make our stations much more accessible, then we're actually going a long way. And the same with older passengers, who again have a lot of spending power, and they're not using it in stations because they're worried and anxious about travelling on that network, which is very complicated. And definitely looking at that first and last mile and how we connect each other, really using those technologies to identify how people can travel about. And they're using applications, we're using other applications and stations to identify how an accessibility, you know, toilet is laid out. We're encouraging changing places, and these are really, you know, technically advanced things that we haven't had in stations before, really thinking about what that passenger needs to make that journey possible, because there's a lot of people who need to use really technical, logically advanced systems to be able to travel from one end of the country to the other. So really, really important for us to have access to all of that technology, but also to take our staff with us, because again, this is new to a lot of staff who've been there for a long time, and actually they need to come on the journey with us, and they're guiding us and working with us to develop these technologies across our stations.
Just briefly, Susan, because I want to bring Ian and Jonathan back in. Colin says one of the problems with UK rail network is that many stations are still inaccessible. How can the industry address this? As a suggestion, could a symbol be put on the station name boards to indicate the station is accessible, similar to what appears on the London Underground?
So, I mean, I think that's really good feedback. And again, we are working with the industry to make sure that people know what level of accessibility our stations are. So it is available to our passengers now, but it's not very clear. So right now we're developing station guides for our passengers that they will be able to use. It will say this is the kind of level of accessibility that you will find at our stations, and really talk about those accessible facilities. And that's not just for disabled and older passengers, it's actually going to be great for every passenger, because it really tells you what platforms have got, you know, are accessible, what entrances you can do, what's the alternative options. And again, I do like that idea of a symbol, and really, as an industry, we do need to come together and say, I mean, I would like to look at a network map myself that has all the same symbols for everything that we do across the network. And I think that's really ambitious, and that's something that we need to absolutely adopt. So I think that's a really good point.
Ian, bringing you back into the conversation, how can station operators and schemes maximise what they can get out of government funding opportunities? Sorry, I lost you there. Ian, just start again, because I missed the beginning of your answer there.
So I think there are really good precedents that we can draw on from other sectors. And they're free to learn from. You don't need government funding to go and learn about best practice from other sectors, really. And you know, I've mentioned automotive as a sector. There's one particular automotive manufacturer that we know well and have worked with, who secretly designed a car for people with accessibility issues, and guess what? They found it sold much better to people without accessibility issues. And we're in the game of patronage. We want people to use the railway, and people instinctively know that, you know, if you design a railway journey through a station for somebody in a wheelchair, it's going to be easier for a parent with a toddler and a buggy as well. So it's going to be more attractive to them. That same principle applies to all sorts of kind of stretch targets that we might set ourselves for dealing with all comers. And I come back to my 40% who are not using the railway. We want them to use the railway. And we've got big climate reasons for that, if nothing else. So I think that's the answer. Look outside the railway, lift up our eyes. There's a really good story of an engineer who had whose wife has arthritis, and he founded the company Oxo Good Grips because she loved to cook and she couldn't use cooking utensils. So he created some for her hands. Well, they sell better than any other cooking utensils now to people with or without arthritis. That's what we want for the railway. We want those stretch targets, people to think, actually, this is really easy.
And it is talking to people who have the difficulties. You know, a great friend of mine's blind and is a big traveller, and he realised that a lot of blind people had lost their confidence through COVID. So he's designed a companion cane, which you use when you're guiding a blind person, and it gives you the social distance. But it's a blind person that realised that problem and actually came up with the solution. So I think it's important, isn't it, when we're making sure our railways are accessible, and particularly as we're moving into a new age, is to make
there's a big new program going on of measuring how accessible stations are going on. Yeah. The DfT is just investing in this. There are technologies out there and techniques out there to allow us to quantify how badly inaccessible our stations are for certain people with certain impairments. Let's challenge ourselves to use that funding and those techniques to measure that, and then go past it. You know.
So right, Jonathan, I'd like to talk to you a bit about how we deliver a good experience at unstaffed stations, because it's clear from every one of these debates we do about the rail industry that obviously people are at the heart, and it's most successful when you put people at the heart. I did spot. Jeff Bunce actually says Heritage Rail has worked hard to make stations more community hubs and accessible, even with minimal budgets and a different user case. We can learn lessons perhaps from there. What do you think about the unstaffed stations? How do we make those work?
Yeah, so there are, I think it's about half of our stations are unstaffed. So this is a really significant issue. But of course, although they might be unstaffed, I mean, staff are still involved in those stations. I think that's probably my first point. It still requires staff who go and are involved with cleaning and putting up posters and enabling technology to work and all of that. So, they may be unstaffed most of the time, but staff are still involved in those stations. I think a lot of it is about getting the technology to work effectively as well. And it's about that community involvement again as well that I mentioned earlier. I think that actually that sense of ownership, and often, I mean, there's some great examples Community Rail Network have done where although it might be unstaffed in terms of rail staff on the platform, by actually having independent retailers or having people from the local community that might have set up a shop or a community facility or something, often a lot of these small communities have lost a lot of the heart of their kind of community centre. The post office might have closed and the pub might have closed, and actually sometimes still having a railway station, you can actually focus things on the railway station, which actually enables activity to take place, and that then helps safety and security, and it helps a whole range of other things in terms of encouraging customers to travel. So I think all stations are different, but it's really important that we kind of learn the lessons and spread that best practice of where smaller stations have got great examples of where investment's happening and sort of real community engagement is taking place.
And Susan, how are station teams supporting the delivery of improved experience for passengers and customers?
I mean, the station teams are passionate about their stations and their customers, and they're working hard to keep abreast of everything that's going on, and particularly around COVID and welcoming people back. So keeping themselves safe, keeping themselves updated, making sure that their stations are in tip-top condition. But from themselves is really they're engaging in further training, really around customer experience, disability awareness. They're keeping themselves updated with engagement with each other. We link in together to talk about initiatives, and they're really taking part in the future state of their stations by saying what they want. So it's very localized because of devolvement. What we've got regions who are out there reaching out in their own communities, and not just a managed station, say that Network Rail might run, but actually they're linking in with the whole of the network to say, well, how do we impact on the next station and the next station, and how does that work? They're currently engaged in a one team programme, which is really about collaboration with everybody who operates and runs through their stations, that they get the same level of training, the same level of understanding of their business, because we've kind of worked separately up to this point, train operating companies versus Network Rail who run in the facilities. And actually what they've done over the last year and a half is actually really join together and really collaborate about what is it we're doing now and how can we do it better. And they've identified key initiatives that they're all undertaking in stations, such as engagement sessions, training sessions, reaching out to customers, mystery shopping, to really understand their own community, and then building up plans and how to respond to their specific needs and regions. So really interesting programme, and actually it's been endorsed in the white paper, to talk about one team and collaboration. So a really significant step change in the way that we operate within our managed stations with our colleagues and our communities.
Frank, I'm going to give you the final word. What are you most excited about as you embrace the new user, if you like, the future user, and also, the different user because of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think we've got a huge opportunity. This gives, the recovery gives us a huge opportunity. And for me, it's really about how we really welcome the customer, reset our focus on customer. And we've mentioned before about customer-centric activities, but also around making sure the customer becomes really ingrained in terms of what we do, not just for our cities to move people away from a car-led recovery, but back into a public transport recovery. Because I suppose the key thing here for me and our teams are, success in restoring passion and confidence is going to be built on action, based on what we do, how we do it, information, how we're telling people how well we're doing things, and improve perception, because that's how we will get people out of their cars and back onto public transport and back into our stations.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Massive thank you to all of our panelists. You've been brilliant. Thank you very much for your insights into station improvements and how these can be implemented using various technologies. And thank you to everyone who's participated so far in the Q&A too. It's great to see so many different questions coming through, and it's really nice for me as a host to make it much more of a conversation rather than me being a facilitator. Next up, we have Sharon Oditunde, Head of Research Partnerships, RSSB Industry Collaboration to Improve Passenger Experience. Sharon will be exploring what the customer experience looks like beyond improving the physical assets, instead meeting customers' expectations. Our virtual stage is yours, Sharon.
Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in today's conference. My name is Sharon Oditunde and I am Head of Partnerships at RSSB. And today I'll be talking about industry collaboration to improve the passenger experience. My role at RSSB is all about partnerships. I work in the research and development team on collaborative research, looking at ways to bring together challenge owners and solution providers to provide effective and efficient ways to deliver a better and safer railway. Over the past few years, I've had the opportunity to get more involved in research that aims to improve the passenger experience, a topic I'm very passionate about, and to investigate ways that technology can be used to make the railway more accessible and easier to use. In recognition of the need for cross-industry collaboration in this space, as well as in many others, a collaborative effort has been made to identify technical needs, set out a clear direction for their development and for the uptake of new solutions through the Railway Technical Strategy. The Rail Technical Strategy, this new edition, is a collaborative effort that has been coordinated by RSSB, Network Rail, members of the UK Rail Research and Innovation Network, UCRIN, and has been developed via engagement with over 100 different organisations. This version differs from previous editions as it is a living strategy, and it sets out the short-term steps needed in context of a longer-term vision. It aims to be more focused, more compelling, and less R&D centric, and is going to be regularly updated through consultation, highlighting opportunities for implementation and identifying gaps where new solutions are needed. The strategy has been built on 5 functional priorities, And these are industry agreed areas where rapid progress is needed and new technical solutions are really critical to make a change. The first and most relevant of these for today's topic of discussion is creating a railway that is easy to use for all. This means providing excellent travel experience, both for regular and occasional users of the system. It means making sure that information is dependable and that journeys are seamless and that travel is accessible, both physically and digitally. This priority, being easy to use for all, has 6 key goals. And for each of these, there's a vision for 2025 and a vision for 2040. And the strategy sets out the stepping stones that are needed to achieve the vision for 2025. For this priority, the goals are to provide accurate, accessible, real-time information for passengers, making it easy to plan and manage journeys, providing the technology that can enable smart fare collection, making rail an easy component of the overall journey, offering personalised services that make travelling enjoyable and easier, providing a service that is accessible for all, so removing exclusionary barriers and enabling independent travel, working with other modes to provide door-to-door solutions, understanding and catering for passengers' first and last mile, and also providing reliable and fast onboard connectivity so that customers can be connected if they choose to be. As the priority lead for the easy to use for all area, I'm working on updating this vision and making sure that it reflects current progress by industry and changing passenger needs. The route maps will be updated biannually, and on the RTS website, there's also a list that we keep up to date of who is doing what related to this topic. While these goals do not encompass everything that is needed to make the railway system easy to use for all, they do highlight the areas where technical solutions are needed. And there are many other industry strategies and plans that provide a broader spectrum of the industry's needs. For example, the William Shapps Plan for Rail sets out a pathway towards a customer-focused future, a future that provides a reliable, punctual service for passengers, that represents good value for money, clear and proactive information with simple, fair and transparent pricing, and services where customers with disabilities, both visible and invisible, and other additional needs, feel welcome, comfortable and valued. The 9 customer experience pillars for the Great British Railway that are outlined in this plan do align closely with the technical delivery areas in the RTS, not just for the easy to use for all priority, but also linking to other priorities such as optimised operations and enabling a data-driven railway. The alignment of this plan and other relevant strategies makes the RTS the perfect foundation for technical innovation and also cross-industry collaboration. A good example of this work and how the RTS can be used is the current plans being developed by the UK Rail Research and Innovation Network, UCRIN, in the area of customer experience. The UCRIN network was established in 2018 and designed to create a powerful collaboration between academia and industry, aiming to provide a real step change in innovation, accelerating new technologies and products from research into market. The network was initially set up to deliver in 4 key areas, which were digital systems, rolling stock, infrastructure, and underpinning all of these, full-scale testing. As a network, there's been an opportunity to review needs and requirements, particularly those outlined in the RTS, and it has become clear that there needs to be more of a user focus. So over the past 18 months, the network has been developing plans for a new inclusive passenger experience centre, a centre with the capabilities and facilities to develop and assess technology that will help make the railway more inclusive. Through collaborative consultation, the centre is being developed around 4 main theme areas. The first of these is inclusive design. So looking at the tools and methods that will enable people who travel, who are currently excluded because of the demands of rail travel, to be included, a concept that improves the overall passenger experience by making journeys easier and more pleasurable for the whole travelling population. The next area covered is digital connectivity, which is a key enabler for better passenger information, helping to encourage passengers to choose rail and opening up opportunities to provide better services. The third area is a better understanding of passenger preferences and future demand, so that this information can be used to drive decision making, making services more appealing to the widest number of people. And so we can understand the impact of potential changes in society, in culture, in demographics, and other factors that may influence passengers. And the fourth area is related to performance metrics. So understanding and measuring what good looks like for passengers. And as an industry, this is something we often do qualitatively, but not so well quantitatively. Collaboration is really helping to build this vision. And as a group, we've had the opportunity to start investigating some of the trends and also looking at best practice from other industries that are good examples of focusing on customer requirements. These concepts have helped develop an initial plan for this centre as a shared industry space that can provide an immersive experience for both end users and designers. Drawing together these plans, we've been able to highlight some initial research areas and to look at opportunities to develop new testing facilities and to work with a broader range of customers to build a picture of what passengers truly need. And it's not just focused on current passengers, but also on those who have never been passengers, who are excluded. This is truly a cross-industry collaboration, and we'll be really keen to hear from others to help shape this vision. There's more information available on our current plans and ways to get in touch on the UCAN website. And keeping in touch is really vital. As I mentioned previously, in terms of the rail technical strategy and the easy to use priority, we want this to be a living document. It's really exciting to see the industry make passengers a key focus, and the opportunity to implement some of these technical solutions in the RTS is one way to achieve the vision of a truly passenger-centric railway. So by working together, both in our industry and with others, we can start making this vision a reality. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sharon. Some great insights shared as to best practices in terms of accessibility and experience. These innovations will really drive change. Wow, time really has flown, and you know what they say. So let's take a lunch break. It's a chance to relax, catch your breath, and debrief. Jump into the meeting hub and continue to gain connections and build your community with your fellow delegates, or chat further to those that you've already met. The connections you build today will remain there for you to use into the future, logging in at your leisure and exchanging views with not just the delegates here today, but future registrants too. Our speakers can offer you plenty of insight, but the most significant source of knowledge on our platform is you, each and every one of you, so do feel free to share it. Don't forget, we have some great prizes for those fully taking advantage of community building. Come the end of the day, those in first, second and third places will have their choice of prize, either Amazon vouchers, a donation to a charity of choice, or the planting of an equivalent number of trees. I'll see you after lunch, so shall we say that we'll meet back here at 2 o'clock for our next panel discussion. See you then.